Assalamu alaikum everyone. It's me, HAFSA FAROOQ, your elementary journalism and mass communication teacher. I hope you all are doing well. So today the topic of our discussion is print media, the history of print media. We're going to discuss the history of print media in the world and in the subcontinent. It will be our last topic of our course. History of print media in the world. None of the printed items we enjoy today would be around without a number of persons in the history. Printing was developed based on early principles of printing, and it has undergone many modifications over the years to meet the needs of people in different eras. Woodblock printing. Woodblock printing was a technique which was used in the Mesopotamian civilization before 3000 BC. Invention of paper in the 2nd century AD by China was the first major milestone in the history of printing press. The prime name associated with the history of printing press is Johannes Gutenberg, the inventor of printing press in 1450. He created individual pieces of type which involved creating a master copy of each letter, devising the molds in which multiple versions can be cast, and developing a suitable alloy metal type in which to cast them. ये जो era था ये movable type printing press का era था. Next, dry point engravings and handwritten form of printing was invented in the year 1465. We are discussing the brief history of print media in the world. Around by the 16th century, the printing press had been in existence for around 50 years. It had spread throughout Europe, and more than 10 million copies of nearly 3,500 works had already been printed. During the first decade of 16th century, Aldus Manutius came up with a printer that gave smaller, more portable books. He is also the first to use italic type. In 1507, Lucas Cran invented the chiaroscuro woodcut, a technique in which drawings and reproduced using 2 or more blocks printed in different colors. Next, American inventor Richard March Hoe builds the first lithographic rotary printing press. Here is a press in which the type is placed on a revolving cylinder instead of a flat bed. This speeds up the printing process dramatically. The invention of the linotype composing machine is a major step forward in the process of printing. With this typesetter, an operator can enter text using a 60-character contained keyboard. The machine outputs the text as slugs having line of metal type. The 21st century have more to talk about digital revolution rather than print technology, except some few innovations like CTP printing with plates and CMYK coloring by the help of digital technology. Later, technology has made several changes in printing technology. Here is a small timeline of further technological progress of print. 1906, photograph. 1938, xerograph. 1951, inkjet printing. 1968, dot matrix printing. 1969, laser printing. 1972, thermal printing. 1984, 3D printing, and 1993, digital printing. The printing press has influenced psychology in several major ways. Before the printing press, people were apt to believe that the text they were reading was true because only the most noteworthy information was recorded. We have discussed the short, brief history of print media in the world. Now we are going to discuss history of print media in the subcontinent. Introduction. Handwritten news sheets. In the subcontinent, journalism started with preliminary handwritten news sheets prepared by government news writers during the Muslim rule. They were written, dated, appeared at regular and frequent intervals. Collecting news. News writers or strangers were assigned in all the areas of the empire to collect news and assemble it in the paper for the court of king. Most prominent and honest individuals were designated for such posts. They earned good salaries and their appointment or abjuration was solely with the king himself. Downfall of Mughal. With the downfall of Mughal rule, Britain started offensive invasion into the subcontinent. Wherever hatred for British surfaced, people started privately owned secret handwritten papers in order to induce and stimulate more hatred against East India Company. In the Revolution of 1857, such papers played an effective role. Arrival of print media. Over the past 2 or 3 centuries, we had seen innovations, inventions, and developments all around the world and almost in all fields of life which we are experiencing currently. Journalism and media are also one of those fields which came into existence, progressed with the passage of time, and then proved their worth and importance for any nation and its common man's life. First printed newspaper, Hickey Gazette, Indian World. Hickey Gazette. The first ever printing press was set up by British at Bombay in 1674. In the end of 18th century, printing presses were installed at Madras and Calcutta. The first printed newspaper of subcontinent appeared in 1780 with the name of Hickey Gazette, published by James August Hickey. The size of the paper was 12 multiplied by 8 with only 4 pages. For the reason that James August Hickey was against East India Company and always brought forth the corruption of government, he was soon jailed, but Hickey continued editing in the jail too. So in November 1781, a newspaper with the name of India Gazette was introduced, which was pro-government and against Hickey. With this haphazard changing scenario, many newspapers came on the scene. Some supported the government and others strived for freedom. Indian World. William Dwan was one of those editors who struggled hard for freedom of press. Earlier, he was a fanatical editor of Bengal Journal, but the government violently removed him with force. Soon he started his own newspaper, Indian World, which was more authentic and openly critical to East India Company. The British released 2 consecutive newspapers to combat it, but failed. Interestingly, circulation of Indian World increased more than expectations. Newspaper of national and regional languages. Jami Jahanuma Maratul Akbar. Jami Jahanuma first printed Urdu newspaper was Jami Jahanuma, published in the Kolkata in 1822 under the supervision of British. Its editor was Munshi Sada Sukh. After some weeks, its language was changed into Persian because the circulation remained extremely low. Later, after 2 years, it was integrated with a 4-page Urdu news sheet for the reason that some of the British officials had learned Urdu, where on the other hand, people could be mobilized to use Urdu language. Jame Jahanuma featured news items from other handwritten news sheets of autonomous states, English newspaper and some of its own. Maratul Akbar. The first printed Persian newspaper, Maratul Akbar, appeared in Calcutta in 1822. Its founder and editor was Raja Ram Mohan Rai. He was a spiritual leader of Hindus. He started Bengali newspapers also. His intention to start newspaper in general was to enhance the knowledge of common people and acquaint them with the policies, laws, and line of action of the British government. This newspaper had a short life, but it was appreciated at the highest degree. Newspaper of regional languages. When journalism entered in the other parts of subcontinent, several newspapers of regional languages also emerged. For instance, Bengali, Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, and Tamil language newspapers. These newspapers included short articles, ephemeral topics, some illustrations, and service articles. Urdu journalism. Urdu journalism started with Jahane Johanuma, but in point of fact, its history begins from 1836, when the father of Maulana Muhammad Hussain Azad, Maulvi Muhammad Baqir, started Delhi Urdu Akbar. After that, a large number of Urdu newspapers emerged in corner to corner of the subcontinent. Some significant factors behind the progress of Urdu journalism were that in 1830, East India Company declared Urdu the official language of small government institutions and court of law. After 1835, many newspapers of regional languages came at time. Government intended to promote Western studies in the subcontinent since Urdu newspapers were appropriate medium for the purpose. The government used to purchase a certain quality of newspapers for officials, schools, and colleges. This setup financially supported some of the newspapers. These were the four elements behind the growth and progress of Urdu journalism in the subcontinent. Later, many new Urdu newspapers started in Delhi, Lahore, Sialkot, Multan, Gujranwala, Gujarat, Peshawar, Rawalpindi, Shimla, Ludhiana, Batala, Amritsar, Agra, Lucknow, Banaras, Bombay, Bareilly, Aligarh, and Madras. However, Delhi and Lahore are considered to be the motherland of Urdu journalism. Newspapers of Delhi. Newspapers of Delhi was the first Delhi Urdu Akbar and the second was Sayyidul Akbar. Delhi Urdu Akbar continued for 21 years. Maulvi Muhammad Baqir was its first editor. The first page of Delhi Urdu Akbar was used for the activities of last Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar. Then the movement and actions of British residents and other officials were included. Sayyidul Akbar came into being in the year 1837. Its founder was Sayyid Muhammad Khan, real brother of Sayyid Muhammad Ahmad Khan. After 9 years, he died in young age, and the paper continued in the editor of Sayyid Ahmad Khan. But the name of editor was kept concealed. In 1850, Sayyid al-Akbar was closed because of financial problems. Newspaper of Lahore. First Urdu newspaper of Lahore was Koh-e-Noor, started in 1850 and continued for more than half a century. Munshi Harsukh Roy was its founder, who was especially called by the British after invasion in Punjab. It was a unique paper with matchless enhancements. It provided not only news and views but enormous educative materials for educators. Koh-e-Noor had largest circulation in all the Urdu newspapers of the subcontinent. In 50 years of its existence, various editors worked for its betterment. The second chief newspaper of Lahore was Darya-e-Noor, which could not continue because it openly condemned the British rule. It had a very short but lively life. Newspapers of Sialkot and Multan. After Lahore, the next important center of Urdu journalism was Sialkot, where Munshi Dewan Chand started newspaper for the first time. He released 6 newspapers before the revolution of 1857, among which Chashma-e-Faiz and Victoria paper were very famous. Victoria paper continued for 50 years. It is interesting to know that Sialkot had the largest circulation of newspapers. There are 2 main reasons given by scholars for increased distribution of newspapers in Sialkot. First, it is that the literacy and education equation and emphasized upon by the British. Secondly, the East India Company implemented juristic education reforms. Multan is considered 2 or 3 newspapers started. Multan is concerned 2 or 3 newspapers started in the city before 1857. For the more part, Riaz-e-Tur was the famous paper. Printing and publishing in Dhaka. It cannot be said with certainty where the first printing press was set up in Bangladesh. It is conjectured that the first printing press in Bangladesh was Ragpur during 1847, about 335 kilometers away from Dhaka. The first printed piece from the printing press was a weekly newspaper named Rangapur Vartabha in August 1847. In addition, the first 2 Bengali weekly newspapers were from Rangapur printing machine, 2 more than 60 years to reach East Bengal or Dhaka for Kolkata. The first English weekly newspaper, the Dhaka News, and was printed and published from Dhaka in 1856. So it is assumed that after 9 years of Rangapur press, the first printing machine of Dhaka was established and the press was named Dhaka Press. Print media in Pakistan. Dawn, the most prestigious English newspaper founded by Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah on 1st October 1942, is still in demand and important for Pakistan journalism. On 23rd March 1940, Hamid Nizami founded the first newspaper for future Pakistan. Nawai Waqt. Later on, Mir Khalilur Rahman founded Jung Group of newspaper on 14th October 1947. This is the biggest and most circulated Urdu newspaper group. There are more 21 English and around 40 Urdu newspaper daily published in Pakistan. More than 40 Urdu newspaper daily published in Pakistan. So, conclusion of this topic is it is safe to say that journalism had its root in the subcontinent since the Muslim rule. A perfect communication system did exist when the British invaded the subcontinent. It is true that British established printing presses and promoted literacy, but it was the endeavor of native of subcontinent. That journalism prospered throughout from corner to corner. As journalism flourished, many broad-minded people of subcontinent entered into the arena of journalism. Even after exclusion of Muslims from journalism in 1857, the Muslim press grew from scrap and fruitfully served the cause of independence. Okay, so we have covered the last topic of our course. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, all of you. Allah Hafiz. Thank you.